What's up guys, James here, how's it going? So this is a response to Heather, aka Uncle Nerd Alert's video, Why I Don't Believe in Evolution. It does seem that she does have a lot of misunderstandings about what evolution actually says. However, this does seem due to her education, so hopefully I'll be able to clear up a few things here. She does seem genuinely interested in hearing both sides of the argument. So it's really actually quite great that I found someone who's willing to listen, and that brings me back to what my channel was originally for in the first place, which was to educate, inform and share ideas. I've got far too bogged down in drama and arguing with idiots recently, so this makes a really nice welcome change. So without further ado then, let's hear what Heather has to say.
Public schools teach evolution as the main theory as to how humans and animals and plants and pretty much how the earth came to be, you know, as this is the way it is, this is proven fact. No. I think that in schools they should teach both sides of the story.
The first thing, of course, is that creationism isn't the only alternate to evolution. You know, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of other creation stories out there, and which are equally as viable. And the reason we teach evolution is that it's nearly universally accepted by all scientists, especially biologists. The evidence is absolutely overwhelming. And if we're going to start teaching about alternate theories, then, you know, we don't teach flat earth theory as opposed to as an alternate to a spherical earth. We don't talk about stork theory instead of sex ed, and we definitely don't talk about God's wrath as an alternate to earthquakes and lightning.
And I just want to say that if I manage to offend you in any way in this video, if you believe in evolution and I'm like, you know, if I just hurt your feelings or something, then feel free to tell me, and also I deeply apologize for it.
You really don't need to worry about upsetting people for simply stating your opinion. If they get pissed off with you, that's their problem. The thing is, we'd never get anywhere if we went along agreeing with everybody all the time. You're arguing in a reasonable way, and if someone has a problem with that, then that's their problem.
But I think it was wise to make this video now, while I don't have as many viewers, so that the chances of me actually being bombed with angry evolutionists is not very high.
Unfortunately, Heather, this is YouTube. You're going to get some very angry people in here occasionally, on both sides of the debate. I've been told that I'm going to hell, I've been told I'm a Satanist, I've been told I'm evil, I've been compared to Hitler and Stalin. This is just something you're going to have to deal with. Sometimes the anger's justified, sometimes it's not.
Everyone should have a basic idea of what evolution actually is, but if they don't, I'm going to say it now. In the beginning, there was space, and there were a bunch of rocks and other particles and things floating around, and then stuff blew up, and it created a planet called Earth.
Now, what you've described just there has absolutely nothing to do with evolution. What you're describing there is a combination of Big Bang theory, accretion disk theory, and stellar formation theory, to name just a few things. They have absolutely nothing to do with evolution at all. Evolution is just concerned with explaining the diversity of life after life started. If any of those theories were proved wrong, that wouldn't prove evolution wrong, or vice versa. Many Muslims, for example, accept the Big Bang, but don't accept evolution.
Which is what we live on. But Earth was not complete yet. It started out that there was a pool that had a bunch of chemicals in it, and there was lightning, and lightning struck the pool in such a certain way that it created one living cell.
The theory about how the first cells came about is known as abiogenesis. I'll cover it in a little bit more detail further on in the video.
And from this cell, all other forms of life came. And basically, it created these animals and plants that just evolved into other things. Why? I don't know. But they just did.
Evolution works through random mutation, which can either add, subtract, or change existing information. Natural selection, which is non-random and makes it more likely for better adapted organisms to survive and pass on their genetic code, whereas worse adapted creatures will simply die off. There's also genetic drift, which is where neutral mutations will build up over time. One way a species can split into two separate species is for the population to get split, and the two groups and changes within the two groups will build up over time until the two groups can no longer interbreed with each other. This can either happen through genetic drift or through the two groups adapting to different environments. It happens over an extremely long timescale. Humans, for example, have 3 billion base pairs of DNA, so you're looking at an average of only one extra base pair of DNA per year. And humans have about 100 mutations every generation. This is misleading though, because one generation of early life would have been hundreds of thousands of times faster than we produce. So you're looking at trillions of generations to get anything near the complexity of a person.
And, yeah, apes evolved into humans, and dinosaurs, before they became extinct, evolved into birds and fish and sharks and many other things. And mammoths turned into elephants.
Humans still are apes, and we share a common ancestor with chimpanzees and gorillas, etc. Some fish evolved to become land animals, not the other way round. A perfect example of an intermediate fossil there would be Tiktaalik. Most dinosaur species simply did become extinct, but some theropods did evolve to become birds, and we've got some really good transitional fossils there. In fact, some of the transitional fossils are so perfect that there's almost been fights which have broken out between scientists who can't decide whether they're looking at a bird-like reptile or a reptile-like bird. And mammoths and elephants share a common ancestor, but mammoths became extinct. Mammoths did not evolve into elephants.
Mistake number 1. In the beginning there was space and rocks and particles floating around. How did they get there? Is there any law in science that says that something can be there without being created that's not alive?
The Big Bang is concerned with what happened after the universe started to expand. It deals with the first quadrillionth of a second or whatever when the universe started. It makes absolutely no claims about how that matter and energy got there in the first place. I personally don't believe it was a god, because a god would have to be very complex in order to create a universe. And that complexity itself can't have come from nowhere. However, there is no way of disproving that a god formed a Big Bang at the moment. And so you're perfectly free to believe that.
Number 2, the Big Bang Theory, where stuff explodes and creates Earth. Let me just say that life cannot come out of destruction, and an explosion is a destruction. Intelligent effects must have intelligent causes.
What you're talking about here is accretion disk theory and stellar formation theory. Basically, if you've got massive clouds of gas, eventually that will pull itself together under its own gravity and form a sphere. Due to the increase in pressure, eventually you'll get massive amounts of heat, which will cause fusion, which changes lighter elements into heavier elements. And we've been able to do this here on Earth with experiments, although admittedly not for long periods of time, because it takes absolutely gigantic quantities of energy in order to do so. Fusion will create absolutely massive amounts of energy and lose mass at the same time. And eventually, when all the fuel of the star burns out, the very last of its energy will cause a supernova. We understand the life cycles of stars through pure physics. However, we've also been able to verify this through observations. We have images of stars at every stage of their life cycle. Our Sun is either a second or third generation star, which is why it has a lot of the heavier elements and why heavier elements are present on Earth. And indeed, life would be utterly impossible if this wasn't the case. Then you've got accretion disk theory. When you have a star forming, the gravity will cause the cloud to start spinning, and you'll get a very large mass in the centre, and there'll also be other masses which are spinning around it, and the forces are in will end up in perfect equilibrium, where the force pulling the object towards the star is in perfect balance with the velocity that the thing's moving around. So by the time that it's got that distance towards it, it's moved an equal distance away, causing it to carry on orbiting. You'll end up with many big masses there because masses which are close to the Sun will move faster and so end up colliding into the big mass, whereas the planet will catch up with the mass which is slightly further away and absorb it like that. There's simply no reason to assume that it is due to intelligent causes, because we understand it at a very, very physical and scientific level.
And rocks cannot think for themselves, therefore they're not intelligent, so it's not possible that the cells in the molecules in that pool would be able to form one living cell, because they couldn't be there in the first place, because they were formed from non-living stuff. Let's say that there were molecules in the pool that were in fact able to form one living cell if they were struck in just the right way, at just the right time by lightning. The chances of a living cell being formed that way, though, is pretty much the same as the Eiffel Tower being made that way.
So here we're getting into abiogenesis, which is the theory about how the first cells originally formed. The short answer is simply we don't know. However, we do have some very solid theories about how this happened. Organic chemicals do seem to have been quite common in the early Earth, and we found a lot of organic chemicals which have arrived here from meteorites and comets, etc. Due to volcanic activity, we get a lot of heavier elements and complex molecules emerging in the Earth. And all that is really necessary for the first cell to take place is one self-replicating molecule with the ability to mutate. That's all that was needed. If a mutation can lead to that molecule replicating faster, it's going to dominate the gene pool. If a mutation can make it more stable or protect it from other elements, or help it digest other molecules more efficiently, then that will also make it spread more efficiently throughout the gene pool. I'll leave a link down to CDK007's channel down below. He's done an excellent series on one of the more solid versions of abiogenesis theory. So yeah, the analogy you used about the Eiffel Tower spontaneously forming is unfortunately a bad analogy. I mean, if the first cells were as complicated as cells we have today, then yes, this would be a perfect analogy. And another version of this is the analogy of a tornado going through a scrapyard and smashing things together and creating a Boeing 747. It just wouldn't happen. But yeah, as I said, the first cells would have been extremely simple. A more accurate analogy could possibly be chucking 1,000 tins of alphabeti spaghetti on the ground and a word spontaneously forming. But yeah, again, we simply do not know for sure. But to me, it just seemed extremely unlikely that this would be impossible, considering there's about 10 hexillion planets in the universe. The chance of it happening somewhere at some point over our 13.7 billion year history seems a near certainty to me.
Let's continue to think that one cell was formed. How can all forms of life come out of that one cell? Because a plant cell is different from an animal cell. They have different particles and different molecules in them. So I'm not really sure how, like, everything can just come out of one cell, because all cells are different.
Whilst, yes, plant and animal cells are extremely different to each other, they all contain the same 20 types of amino acid and the same four base pairs of DNA. So in this way, they are extremely similar. However, the reason that plant and animal cells are so different to each other is because they've been separated from each other for over 500 million years of evolution. This is more than enough time for them to become this different. They've got the same 20 amino acids and the same 4 base pairs of DNA. But the sequences of these are different. And here we get into phylogeny. Phylogeny is basically looking at the sequences of DNA and determining relationships between species. For example, chimpanzees are over 98% similar to humans genetically, and we can verify that. We can verify this close relationship by looking back at the fossil record and using radiometric dating. And it just so happens that these three methods all fit with each other absolutely perfectly in every species we've ever checked, which proves evolution beyond a shadow of a doubt. I did get a little bit sidetracked there, but basically it's just the proteins and the enzymes which are different between plants and animals. And we've even been able to evolve new proteins in the lab. One example of this would be nylonase. Basically, there was a bacteria which had a mutation which replicated a section of DNA, and then there was another mutation which added an extra C base into the DNA, which pushed that whole replicated sequence along one, which created a completely new protein which we called nylonase because it digested nylon. This would be absolutely impossible in the wild, as nylon's only been around for, I think it's about 40 years. So that shows just how quickly these new proteins can evolve. So it's definitely possible that for this level of difference to occur in such a long a timescale.
5. The actual evolution part of my evolution rant. Well, humans evolved from monkeys, is what they tell us. But there have actually been no fossils at all found to prove this. Like, take Piltdown Man, who was found in a gravel pit in 1912. Everyone thought that he was the missing link between humans and monkeys for 42 years. But then it was discovered that he was a complete forgery. the bones had been stained to pretend to be a lot older than they were, and the teeth had been filed down, and it was just fake. There were lots of other incidents where people thought they had found the missing link, but it proved to be either the tooth of a wild pig or the skull of a donkey, and there haven't been any fossils found about dinosaurs evolving or really just anything else. So that's,
I'm afraid what you've been told here is an outright lie. There have been thousands of transitional fossils which have been found. Everything from theropods to birds, to land mammals to whales, and from monkey-like ancestors to humans. We have absolutely thousands of them. Yes, some of them were outright forgeries by people who wanted to get rich, and some of the ones which have been found have been put in the wrong place on the Tree of Life. But there certainly are many, many genuine ones, and many of these have also been verified through phylogeny and radiometric dating as well.
6. This is the part that really confuses me. If we evolved a bajillion years ago, then how come there are monkeys that aren't evolving anymore? How come nothing is evolving? Because surely, why are there even monkeys left?
Humans and chimps shared a common ancestor. It wasn't the case that chimpanzees stopped evolving and we carried on. We simply took a different direction to them. We evolved in order to live on the open plains, whereas chimpanzees have evolved to live in much denser woodland. If you go back further, then yes, we do share a common ancestor with monkeys, and our ancestor is more likely to have been more monkey-like than more man-like. However, monkeys didn't stop evolving, and they still are evolving. Everything is still evolving, but evolution is generally a very, very slow process. Another example of evolution happening today would be bacteria. We've got countless examples of bacteria evolving in the lab. That's why you have to take a full course of medication if you get an infectious disease. It's because if you don't take the full course and any bacteria survive, when they've managed to build up again, they've built up a resistance to your medication. And if this happens 2 or 3 times, they'll have built up a near immunity to it. We've also got examples of fruit flies evolving into separate species in the lab as well, and countless other experiments. Guppies was another experiment. They put guppies in fish tanks with predators, and they found, and when there was lots of predators, they found that they got a lot duller. They evolved to be a lot duller because then the predators wouldn't be able to see them as well. With humans, people are being born without wisdom teeth now. Wisdom teeth are actually left over from ape ancestors which had bigger jaws, and they're actually not really needed anymore. In fact, you're more likely to survive without them than with them. Also, appendixes are getting smaller as well. That's another part of evolution. Elephants' tusks have got smaller due to hunting. The ones with the smaller tusks are less likely to get hunted. Everything is evolving, it's just generally quite a slow process.
Why? 7. More about the dinosaurs. It was proved that the dinosaurs went extinct, not instinct, a long, long time ago. However, there have been blood and hemoglobin found on dinosaur bones, which could only have lasted a few thousand years.
So I think it's 2 cases now where they found soft tissue inside dinosaur bones. These have just been particularly well preserved specimens because minerals haven't been able to seep within the bones. If you compare this to the level of preservation on, say, a 4,000-year-old Egyptian mummy, they are absolutely nowhere close or even comparable. It certainly is possible for a blood vessel to preserve for that long under the right circumstances. The woman who found this bone which you're referring to was quite Christian herself, and is as equally appalled as I am that her findings have been misinterpreted by young Earth creationists. Furthermore, radiometric dating has been able to establish that yes, this dinosaur bone was in fact 68 million years old.
This is part 8, right? Okay, well the Earth's magnetic field, I cannot talk, has been decaying so fast that it couldn't be more than 10,000 years old.
The research which stated this was extremely dishonest. Basically, they took a magnetic field reading from sometime in the 1700s, and one quite recently, and they noticed, I think it was a 10% decrease in field strength. And extrapolating those results, they found that the magnetic field strength would half every 1400 years, and that would mean that the magnetic field would have been so strong 10,000 years ago that it would make life impossible. The problem with this is that you can't assume an exponential change by taking two readings. And secondly, magnetic field strength goes up and down and even reverses periodically. It doesn't constantly decrease as the creationists were claiming.
Also, salt is going into the sea much faster than it is escaping. And the ocean is not nearly as salty as it should be in the evolutionist's mind.
Scientists have actually found that the level of salt in the sea has actually been stable for billions of years, and there are natural processes which regulate the level of salt in the sea. I'll leave a link to an article explaining it a lot better than I could down below. But one of the big problems I see with this argument is that if the amount of salt in the sea was 6,000 years ago, then none of the fish which were in it could have survived today, because you can't put freshwater fish in salt water, and you can't put saltwater fish in fresh water. So I'm afraid they've destroyed their own argument with this one. So that's nearly it from me. I'm going to leave links down below about a lot of the things I've discussed here. Also going to leave links to 2 of my other videos which you might find quite interesting, and links to some channels which explain evolution a lot better than I ever could. And finally, I'd just like to recommend some books for you to read. So, first off, of course, would be Charles Darwin, The Origin of the Species. It's not particularly well written, it doesn't flow very nicely compared with a lot of modern books, but the information it contains is absolutely fascinating, even if it is a tiny bit outdated. Next up, A Brief History of Time. Fantastic book, and surprisingly easy to understand. You shouldn't have any trouble with it whatsoever. Next up, DNA, The Secret of Life, by James Watson. I don't know how I forgot his name, but he is the co-founder, he is the co-discoverer of DNA, and I've learned a hell of a lot from reading this book about genetics on the chemical level. Really can't recommend it enough. Next up, David Attenborough's First Life, a fantastic book about early life, evolution, and even some abiogenesis in there, and it's got some absolutely beautiful illustrations and photos as well. And last but certainly not least would be Richard Dawkins, The Greatest Show on Earth. Now, regardless of what you think about his views on evolution, he is a top-notch biologist, and this book presents the evidence for evolution and a little bit against creationism in a way that is extremely easy to understand. And yeah, can't recommend that book enough. Thanks for watching, guys. I know this has been a very long video, but Heather, I really hope you've learnt something from this. And even if you don't accept evolution, hopefully it's given you a better understanding about what evolution actually says. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.